appreciate to welcome the next expert of our series, the political scientist, researcher and lecturer at the University of Montenegro in Podgorica, and it's really an honor to share your experience and your expertise in the frame of this format. Hello, Marko.
Hello, Sylvia. Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure to participate in this kind idea of yours, which I find very important for connecting region and gathering different opinions and thoughts about this crisis. I'm sending warm greetings to you and to our viewers from Montenegro, from my in-house office, which I intentionally put in kitchen as the most visited room in every house during the crisis, I suppose.
So it's really a pleasure to have you here, Marko, and just to have the possibility to talk about the situation in Montenegro. And you just said that we are all working from in-house or home office, so it's a new situation for us all. And when looking to Montenegro, I would like to know at first what are the developments regarding these corona pandemic in Montenegro. Montenegro has the number of Montenegrin inhabitants is 140,000. So, and when you also look at all the numbers, it's not that dramatic compared to other countries. But of course, it's not existing in Montenegro. So you have, of course, also such cases. And what is the healthcare situation and healthcare system like in Montenegro at the moment?
Well, yes, we are just something over 600,000 inhabitants. So speaking with the statistic terminology, it's a small number statistics, such as the numbers in this crisis. But I have to tell, in a preparation for this interview, I have been told that there is no many information about the current situation in Montenegro. So I have prepared some statistics and data to make a picture about the current situation in Montenegro. Well, first of all, in Montenegro, until today, we have 311 infected people, while 55 have been cured so far. Unfortunately, 5 citizens have lost their lives, 4 of them from complications of their chronic diseases, and 1 of them from complications directly caused by this new virus. Also, there is some statistics that I want to share with you. In comparison with the region, we have our mortality rate is lowest, and it's around 0.76% right now. Also, Montenegro ranks second in the region in terms of testing, and we are testing 4,800 inhabitants per million. That is the official way how you're describing the situation. Also, which I find is more important, is that we have between 7 and 8% of health workers being infected, which is way below the current European average, which is 15%. So far we are doing well in terms of these numbers that I mentioned. But I have to tell you that surprisingly, our healthcare system responded very well. I said surprisingly because in previous year we can see some reports from international organizations that ranked in which our healthcare system wasn't ranked very well. So in this crisis, surprisingly, our healthcare system responded very well due to, I would say, very good organization and coordination from the center of the government. Also, a very good organization of emergency procurement for medical devices, and also establishment on the national coordination body for communicable diseases. That's all as a package made that Montenegro at the beginning of this crisis was praised for being effective and transparent in fighting against this virus.
And did it go from the government, or was it as according to your analysis? So when you was it coordinated directly from the government, or were they consultations? From our healthcare system with the government in coordinating all the measures, because in Austria, for example, there was a broad coordination, still is, and from which side would you see was this coordination first of all started, and where do you see also the responsibility first of all for this success story? Good luck.
I have to say that combination of broader coordination, which is consisted of national coordination body as a center for this coordination process, but every medical institution and also involvement of scientists, then different small and medium businesses, civil society organizations, then PR and communication experts who on a volunteer basis made a strategic communication plan and crisis management plan for the government and for the medical institutions. So now we have several hundred of clear press releases and clear press conferences going on in Montenegro. So overall, all this make my opinion to said that the coordination and fighting against this virus is doing well so far in Montenegro.
And regarding the measures taken by the government, what do they look like? Which restrictions have been taken? And as you just said, it's going well. So there is, I suppose, a broad acceptance among the population in Montenegro then.
Yes. I have to tell that. Reaction of the government and was in time and appropriate, and that is proven by those facts. On 28th of February, we had first measures from the government prohibiting flights from and to north of the Italy. It was way before first official case of citizen infected by new virus. We have a first official case at 17th of March, so it was 20 days before. 20 days before that, we had first measures in Montenegro. After that, as time has passed and the danger from COVID-19 has been more worrying, so did the measures of the national coordination. So now we have adopted around 90 measures and around 20 recommendations from this national coordination body in coordination with, of course, Institute for Public Health and other medical institutions. When it comes to the acceptance of these measures, well, just to describe briefly, we do not have emergency of state. We do have some kind of daily curfew from 7 p.m. during the working days and 1 p.m. during the weekends. So and Other measures are pretty much similar, like in every country in Europe: social and physical distancing, wearing masks, no more than 2 people together on the streets, a ban on private and public gatherings, and also closed everything than markets and and places that you really need for daily life. When it comes to the acceptance, I have data from the opinion poll, which was conducted by Ipsos Strategic Agency with cooperation with the UNICEF office in Montenegro. It was released 10 days ago, and that opinion poll showed that about 60% of citizens are convinced of the readiness of institutions to respond to this problem. So readiness of government, medical institutions, World Health Organization, and healthcare system in Montenegro. Also, 68% fully support and 95% support the government of Montenegro in establishing a national coordination body and adopting measures to combat coronavirus. In general, most of these measures causing high support from citizens of Montenegro, especially those one in terms of banning private and public gatherings, self-isolation, quarantine, and closure of gathering facilities. Also, every 4th citizen of Montenegro does not support the publication of names of the people in self-isolation, which unfortunately was the case in Montenegro in a previous month. And as I mentioned before, this situation made that focus completely shift from politicians, leaders, MPs to scientists, epidemiologists, and medical workers, and that this opinion poll proved that with data that the first 3 places of trust of citizens on the first 3 places are director and deputy director of Institute for Public Health, and on the 3rd place is director of the Clinical Center of Montenegro. On the 4th place is a prime minister.
Dusko Markovic. So
yes.
So he's present also with press conferences, informing the public what is going on and which measures are to expect in the next days. So are there regular press conferences for the population, for the audience?
Yes, he's appearing regularly in the media at the beginning of a crisis. On the first press conference, when he officially described the way of finding the first official case of infected citizen of Montenegro. After that, he has several appearances in media, basically around describing some measures and calling people to stick with that measures from the national coordination body, and also in a previous week to describe in detail the economic measures for support to citizens in need and micro, medium, and small businesses.
Mm-hmm. And then the prospects, when you mentioned the economic help and measures, what are the prospects for because all in all we are facing and we can expect a general global crisis and economic crisis. There are many comparisons to the 1930s, and then what are the numbers for Montenegro at the moment?
Well, the government prepared, let's say, 2 packages of economic measures so far, and I think that packages are in coordination with the so-called aftershocks of this crisis. First package is prepared for people in need mostly. The second one is the economic one for business, and the third one, which has to be delivered so far, is about the social economic, like a mixture of these measures. Montenegrin economy is too small, and we are depending on services a lot, and tourism, of course. Market is widely open and depend on import. So International Monetary Fund expecting decline of economic growth by 9% in Montenegro in this year. So we hope that our using of euro as a currency could make it easier to go through this crisis somehow economically. Maybe the doors of European Central Bank could be open for us for some loans. Some economic experts said that our country has to make additional loans in numbers of 500 to 600 million euros to help economy sector and healthcare sector in Montenegro.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that the emergency state is not proclaimed in Montenegro. So it's in a way on a regular basis, and I suppose that also the executive, meaning the police, is not visible in Montenegro, in contrast to other Eastern European countries where you have the emergency state proclaimed, and where it might seem to be used by the political elites, by the governments, to widen their political influence and to reduce press freedom. So my question regarding to Montenegro is other changes for press freedom at the moment? What is you mentioned the public opinion in form of the opinion polls, but the media work and press freedom, is there any change at the moment, or does it work as usual?
Well, in my opinion, it works as usual. They, after few first press conferences with the journalists inside, they decided to shift on online questioning on the press conferences, and there is no any voices against that coming from the media outlets and from the journalists themselves. Also, the latest opinion poll showed that citizens of Montenegro mostly being informed by TV station and online media outlets. So I think that there are the journalists and media workers are always mentioned in official statements from the national coordination body and government of Montenegro as part of our society that has to be under that has to be followed with all these measures, because they are always in touch with the different persons. So I think that media are doing a very good job right now in informing citizens very well. And if I can make a comparison with media outlets in region, fortunately in Montenegro we do not have yellow or yellowish media outlets, and also we cannot observe media with we do not have exactly media that with purpose making disinformation and fake news about this situation or any other situation. There is some cases transmitting the news and information from other media, but never making the disinformation and fake news itself. Also, when it comes to the area of freedoms, from some very important addresses from Brussels, there are, of course, playing the watchdog role on a, and there are always called for right balance between respecting freedom of expression and acting proportionately on this matter, and to make a balance between acting against spreading of panic and fake news in this difficult time, but always taking into consideration protection of basic human rights.
We can see a broad common sense on the situation, on the measures, on the needed measures. So in all spheres, as I may say, so from the political side, healthcare side, civil society, and media. So there is this broad consensus. Is it the first time in Montenegro that there's such measures, and you have such a common sense within all these various fields, political to health and civil society?
In my personal opinion, I think that this crisis made this common sense broader, and yes, it's a precedent in Montenegro, I have to say, because in a society which is still divided by many questions, we do have divisions and cleavages within the media sector, of course. So right now, even we still do have very loud statements from the media outlets against some decision of the national, but at the end of the day, they are all on the same page during the crisis.
Mm-hmm. And in the long run, might it be then also useful, so to say, for the government, for the actual government, Democratic Party of Socialists, the next parliamentary elections were set for October this year, but maybe it will be then not, but October maybe next year. I suppose it is no topic at the moment to fix the date, but the government at the moment under Duško Marković appears to be stable in its position, and I suppose also Milo Đukanović as most long-standing statesman in East and Southeast Europe when we see and in comparison to other countries.
I think that it's not a news or a new information. If I told you that, like in most European countries, in a center of the situation about the crisis is, of course, executive branch of power. So the government is more present in media and public life than ever. So the focus is completely shift from the oppositional parties or other powers in a country, even from the parliament and from constitutional court, and stick with decisions that government made. In my opinion, the bigger problem of using this situation from the ruling parties or the governments in Europe in general, and especially in the Western Balkans, is that we have to foster institutions to work properly and to behave according to the constitutions in their countries. Because I analyzed a little bit in previous days working of the parliaments across the Europe. So basically in most European countries, parliaments are pretty much closed, and not to mention, of course, the extreme example of Hungary. In Montenegro is pretty much the same situation. Parliament is not, we cannot not hear a lot from the parliament and from the constitution court, but we need that all these measures and work of government and national coordination body to be discussed at the parliament. They have just several committee meetings in a previous 1 month, and now we are expecting first plenary session where the economic measures is expected to be discussed in the parliament. So I have to tell that from my perspective, this is maybe the greatest issue for democracy processes during the crisis, where civil society organizations, individuals, experts, and others, and media, of course, have to speak up on this matter and to foster institutions to work properly in the period of crisis.
Mm-hmm. And some polarization or conflict appears to be shifted to the background. This is the new freedom of religion law, which was set in 27th of December last year, and which led to conflicts, protests, and this conflict appears to disappear, but in a way also appears again, because today we have Easter Monday, and also the Orthodox ceremonies. And what is the state at the moment regarding this new law of religious freedom in Montenegro, and how would you also explain also the whole constellation, because it's also a conflict with not only the Serbian Orthodox Church, but also with Serbia as a bilateral relationship. What is your point of view on this highly complicated and long-lasting conflict?
Well, there are two topics that you mentioned, and that, in my opinion, needs an hour or more to spend in face-to-face conversation. The first one is the phenomena of a long-lasting leadership of President Đukanović, and not going in depth analysis about that, I just want to mention for our public, which are not from Montenegro, because we know those things. Just I want to mention the several things that I find important for understanding this case. First of all, the ruling party in Montenegro inherited significant party infrastructure from former communist party. This also applies to the territorial organization, the internal organization of the party, and also. Secondly, unlike political parties with similar past in a region, the ruling party in Montenegro has shown the ability to adapt and change structure very quickly according to specific circumstances, from pro-Serbian politics to pro-European politics, pro-Milosevic politics to pro-European politics. This was predominantly influenced by President Đukanović with every position which he covered in a previous period. Also, it is equally important to mention that Đukanović belongs to the group of charismatic leaders. So if we can invoke the termination of power of Max Weber, for example, then we might say that power stems largely from his charisma and only partly from the position he covers. Of course, that due to long-term being into the power, he can shift focus to the official position he covers. But I have to tell that in comparison with some countries in the region, President Đukanović follows the constitutional jurisdictions of presidents. Though thanks to his many years in power, he is much more present in the public domain and more active in commenting on the country's problems than the previous president. However, he only appeared several times during this crisis. So I have to tell that. Also, democracy in the Western Balkans are still fragile and with many deficiencies. So even in Montenegro, we cannot still speak about finding efficient democratic mechanism for fighting corruption and for analyzing and prevention of use state resources in election processes. And the last thing on this topic, in Montenegro, since the introduction of multipartism, we have failed to create a political party that would give the strength to opposition through a clear agenda, clear ideological concepts and framework for socio-economic changes. And when you ask me about the situation of a law on religion freedoms, it is also the topic for in-depth conversation. And I have to tell that the problem is multi-layered, and every layer of this problem has to be discussed and explained. But there is few facts that I have to and I want to share. First of all, government needs new law on religious freedoms because an old one was into force from 1977. Also, Serbian Orthodox Church is the only religious community which doesn't have so-called special agreement with the government for regulating mutual relations. And behind this problem, this legal problem, there is a layers of problems with tradition, with political interests, and maybe economic interests, of course. And I have to tell that this process of designing new law is 5 years long, but the timing for adaptation of this law was, I would say, disputable. It was late December, just before the holidays. So after the adaptation, we have bad reaction from Nationalistic Coalition of Democratic Front in the parliament. That was the really bad pictures for ending a year. And after that, we have peaceful protest of people and clergy in the streets of cities of Montenegro. And every Thursday and every Sunday, of course, before the coronavirus comes in Montenegro. And according to the relevant reports, police act very professional during the protests. This is par excellence internal problem of Montenegro, and it is seen as such an union. And from the important addresses from Brussels, they just want to see resolving a problem in a democratic way by dialogue. So Prime Minister, before the crisis initiated, he established the legal expert and the legal expert team, and the Serbian Orthodox Church also did the same. And Prime Minister initiated dialogue in this matter. So I can expect that after this crisis ends, that the dialogue will continue, and that we can expect the resolution of this problem just before the elections in October, which will be useful for both sides, like a win-win situation for both sides, especially on the legal matter. Partly this law has positive evaluation from Venice Commission, and basically the discussion is around 2 or 3 articles within this law. And as you mentioned, this have a broader consequences, because geopolitical position of Montenegro is very interesting, and Serbia, after the membership into the NATO, Serbian Orthodox Church remains pretty much only channel for indirect influence from Russia, but because cleavages in our society and that identical cleavage Montenegrins, of course, as you mentioned, Serbia is very keen to act in this matter in Montenegro. Mm-hmm. Which disrupt, of course, in some percentage our diplomatic relations, which are on the lowest point, I would say, in the last decade.
Okay, and what you mentioned with this law, it's the question of, it's this simple question of ownership. To whom the churches in Montenegro belong? Is it now the Serbian Orthodox Church, or is it the Montenegrin state? And this is interesting that, as you mentioned, an internal problem became a reason for bilateral tension in a way, so that finally Vučić and Đukanović, I suppose, will then talk directly on that topic. Orthodox Church, as you also mentioned, with since the NATO membership of Montenegro 2017, this is from the religious side a political opportunity to take its influence. And now we touch your field of research, geopolitical interests, as you mentioned. Before I ask you, how would you also rate the whole situation? So we have the EU integration process of Montenegro, which I would say at the moment it's nearly, not to be too much provoking, but it appears to be invisible in Central and Western Europe. What are the developments and achievements in this EU enlargement process regarding Montenegro? And also interests, as you mentioned, from Russia, and also another global player, China.
European Union is well presented in Montenegro, of course, and during this crisis, I have to say that the support and assistance from the European Union is well covered in all media outlets and official statements from the government, because they provided exactly for Montenegro. A joint research center has provided a control material which solves the problem of false negative tests of COVID-19, and Montenegro was the first country which received that material from the GRC, which is most important scientific organization within the European Union. Also, as I mentioned, the geopolitical position of Montenegro is very interesting, and it's been interesting during the centuries. Of course, we have influence from all other sides of the world, from Venice, France, also Hungarians and Russians, of course, and Turkish Empire, which we were included for centuries. Strategically impose our Adriatic Sea coast, and which is the main factor of our interesting geopolitical position, and they succeed to make a Mediterranean circle with our membership, but of course, as expected, that disrupted relations with Russia, because the main goal of Russian geopolitics in this area is to prove their image of great power and to maintain presence in in this region, in the Balkan region, and indirectly through the Balkan to be present in Europe. So right now there is just a few friends of Russia in this region, but I would say, unfortunately, if we are positive about international relations, unfortunately, our diplomatic relations are disrupted and on the lowest point in the last decade, pretty much similar with our relations with Serbia. On the other hand, the biggest economic investment in Montenegrin history is building the first highway, which is built from the loan of one Chinese bank, and also it's predominantly is building from Chinese companies. So China is well presented in Montenegro with this hard power means and instruments such as economic influence, but also with soft power means, with culture presence, with free of charge language courses. So I think that right now during donations from China, but at the same level from United States, from Turkey, from Emirates, and so on and so on. So in comparison with the region, we still do not have any foreign medical workers or soldiers, such as in Serbia, in Montenegro. So there is no Chinese medical workers or Russian soldiers supporting our human resources. And this period of shifting pandemic from China to other parts of the world, in my opinion, China can use to prove its status in countries of its interest. So it will happen, of course, with this region, which is of the greatest importance for the geopolitics of China.
Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, the Chinese the influence from China to Europe and to Montenegro in concrete. What are the pessimistic prospects at the moment are the deficiencies and the limitation of liberal democracy. And do you see from such geopolitical influences the problem and also the risk that liberal democracy, or not appropriately consolidated democracy as we have it now, could be much more decreased and limited?
Well, I read several articles about in area how China is functioning and how investments from China are functioning in different countries. So maybe it's a area for further discussion, and of course this is area that has to be followed in Montenegro too. The question is that it's pretty much limited just on the economic relationships. So there is no or at least I cannot see any impact of functioning democracy in Montenegro, which have, on the other side, we have our own deficiencies. So we do not need anything from abroad to make us more fragile.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, and at the moment you do not have an emergency state in Montenegro, but are there any prospects of lightening all the measures which are taken at the moment, and from this middle rank perspective, and what do you see from a long lasting and broader prospect for the future? So what are our lessons learned from the actual situation, the corona crisis, the global corona crisis, and what we can take for our common future then?
Well, our officials are very much careful when it comes to the topic of loosening of measures or measures relaxation. So we just have few ideas of mid-May that this could happen in Montenegro. But when it comes to the numbers, I have to tell that in last week, every day we have just up to 5 new cases of coronavirus, but they are pretty much careful because of the condition of our medical institutions, and they want to be completely sure when this topic comes to the agenda. Also, for such a small country and for the region in general, it will be of the greatest importance to work together and to cooperate, because we are there is many interlinkages between us, and opening borders on the one side can cause a plenty of consequences on the other side. So I think at the area of loosening of measures, we have to cooperate together, and that our leaders should foster a mutual cooperation in a region and networking of our institutions, medical institutions, governments, civil society. Every part of the society has to make assessment on this crisis. Just after that, we could have a complete picture how this will end. And as some general message, I have to tell that we must speak up, at least through this kind of platforms as yours, to convince our citizens that measures of restriction on fundamental freedoms are temporary, and that these restrictions have been introduced on the basis of our indirect mutual consent, so that through the analysis of the situation in the crisis, pointing out problems, open argumentation, through clear and well-intentioned criticism of our institutions, we should indicate that after the crisis, we expect these rights to be returned to us. And this sounds like an implied thing, but in a time of strengthening of nationalisms of every kind, I think that we must insist on basic democratic values. And this could be a general message for acting within Europe and European Union, and especially in a region of the Western Balkans during this crisis, because it's a very short limit between playing within democratic processes and follow democratic values in the countries, and shift into the nationalistic vulnerability of basic human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of media, as we can see, unfortunately, in some examples in European Union, within the European Union. Also, I have to tell that this situation proved that, in my opinion, one of the greatest problems in European Union is the cleavage periphery, and not only the short-sightedness of some EU member states to problems in the Western Balkans, but for the problems in some other EU members, and transitional crisis, which this is, need transitional response. So in a situation with different governments acting in a world, different playing at least coordination from supranational or transnational organizations. And when it comes to the area of public health, protection of human rights, children, war crimes, we still need coordination of global institutions such as UN family.
Okay, you said a lot of keywords and important points. So what is important? Supranational, international coordination, regional cooperation, civic engagement, and also the awareness that all the restrictions we face at the moment are temporary, as you said, and we all work on this understanding and awareness that we have just to work on liberal democracy, liberal democratization, consolidating liberal democracy, all from our workstations, either at home as at the moment, as then in the future again in normal offices, and then hopefully also in further corporations. And Marko Savić, Marko, I really appreciate it, and many thanks for sharing your experiences, your expertise with us, and to all of the audience and listeners and viewers, many thanks for watching us and relevant and much important topics. So thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity once again, and I hope that our cooperation will not stop here. So wish you all the best, and stay safe and stay at home. This will end soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.